The boardroom fell silent as I stood up from my chair. Harrison Kingsley, CEO of Fortress Industries, sat at the head of the mahogany table, his silver cufflinks catching the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The executives around the mahogany table watched as I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out 3 sheets of paper. My phone had just pinged. The notification glowed on the screen in front of me, an exclusivity alert from our primary supplier. Perfect timing, almost too perfect. I caught Harrison's eyes tracking my movement as I walked the length of that conference table. Each step echoed against the polished floor. My annual review had been scheduled for this exact moment, sandwiched between quarterly projections and budget allocations. They'd planned it that way, a power move, a reminder of hierarchy. I placed the first document in front of Harrison, my resignation letter. The second document landed beside it, a vendor voidance agreement. The third made him go pale. A new rate card from our supplier showing costs that had just tripled overnight. "What the hell is this, Cross?" Harrison's voice came out tight, controlled, but I saw his jaw clench. 3 months earlier, I'd requested approval for a $3,100 trip to Columbus, Ohio. A supplier conference, nothing extravagant, economy flight, mid-range hotel. The kind of trip I'd taken dozens of times in my 8 years at Fortress. Harrison had denied it with 4 words that still burned: "We're not paying for your expensive work trip." Now, that decision was about to cost Fortress approximately $4.2 million annually. And I was about to walk away from it all. Welcome to Corporate Vault, where the real stories behind closed boardroom doors finally get told. The handshakes that hide daggers. The decisions that change everything. The moments when standing up costs everything, but staying silent costs more. If you're drawn to these stories of corporate warfare fought with spreadsheets and strategy instead of swords, joining this community means something. Every subscription brings us closer to our first milestone of 1,000 people who understand that the most dramatic battles happen in buildings with glass facades and mission statements about integrity. The button's there whenever you're ready. Now let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Sterling Cross. At the time, I was Director of Supply Chain Operations at Fortress Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing firm based in Detroit. We specialized in automotive components, the parts most people never see but every vehicle needs. Brake assemblies, transmission components, the unglamorous backbone of an industry. I started at Fortress right out of Michigan State in a junior purchasing role. Worked my way up through procurement, logistics coordination, vendor management, and finally into the director position. 8 years of building relationships, learning every corner of our supply chain, becoming the person who knew which supplier could rush an emergency order and which required 3 weeks' notice for everything. I knew our operation better than anyone in that building, including Harrison Kingsley. Harrison had joined Fortress as CEO about 18 months before this story reaches its breaking point. He came from a private equity background, brought in by the board to streamline operations and maximize shareholder value. Corporate speak for cutting costs and squeezing margins until something broke. He was 52, always impeccably dressed, always carrying himself with the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly challenged. Harvard MBA, prior executive positions at firms that looked impressive on paper, but that I'd noticed had all declined shortly after his departure. He didn't see people, he saw line items, and I was about to become a very expensive line item to ignore. The trouble started in March. Our primary supplier, Cromwell Advanced Materials, held an annual conference every spring in Columbus. It wasn't a vacation. It was 3 days of workshops on new manufacturing processes, supply chain innovations, and networking with other major buyers in the automotive sector. More importantly, it was where Cromwell announced their strategic initiatives for the coming year. I'd attended every year since taking the director role. The connections I'd built there had saved Fortress hundreds of thousands in rush fees, secured us priority allocation during material shortages, and given us early access to new materials that kept us competitive. The conference registration came through in early February. Total cost breakdown: $640 for the flight, $420 for 3 nights at the conference hotel, $300 for the registration fee, and I'd budgeted $900 for meals and ground transportation. $3,100 all in. I submitted the expense pre-approval through the system, same as I'd done for years. 3 days later, I got the denial, not from finance, not from HR, directly from Harrison's office. I walked up to the executive floor, where the carpet got thicker and the art on the walls got more expensive. Harrison's assistant, a sharp woman named Elise who'd been there longer than anyone, gave me a sympathetic look as she waved me into his office. Harrison didn't look up from his computer. "Cross, what can I do for you? The Columbus Supplier Conference. I noticed the expense was denied. I'm hoping that's an error." He glanced at his screen, clicked twice. No error. $3,100 for a networking event, that's excessive. It's not networking, it's strategic intelligence on our primary supplier's operations. I've gone every year. And I'm sure you've had a wonderful time. But we're tightening discretionary spending. Find a webinar or something. The dismissiveness in his tone made my teeth clench. Harrison, this isn't discretionary. Cromwell supplies 68% of our raw materials. Understanding their direction affects our entire production schedule. He finally looked up at me. Sterling, you're a talented director, but you need to understand the new reality here. Every dollar counts. We can't justify expensive trips for every manager who wants to maintain relationships. I'm not every manager. I'm the director of supply chain operations, and this supplier represents request denied. He turned back to his screen. Was there anything else? I stood there for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, then I walked out. Elise caught my eye as I passed her desk. She mouthed 2 words, I'm sorry. I appreciated it, but sorry didn't change anything. Back in my office, I sat staring at the email denial. The more I looked at it, the more a familiar pattern emerged. This wasn't about $3,100. Fortress had approved a $7,500 executive retreat to a golf resort in Arizona just 2 weeks earlier. Harrison had attended, so had the CFO and VP of sales. This was about control, about establishing a hierarchy where Harrison decided who mattered and who didn't. I opened my file on Cromwell Advanced Materials. The relationship with Cromwell went back 11 years, predating my arrival at Fortress. But I'd spent the last 5 years building something special with their team. The account rep, a straight shooter named Kyle Hutchinson, had become more than a vendor contact. We'd worked through supply disruptions during the pandemic, negotiated creative payment terms when Fortress had a cash crunch in 2021, built trust. More importantly, I'd developed a relationship with Cromwell's VP of Strategic Accounts, a woman named Autumn Sheffield. She and I thought alike, both focused on long-term partnerships over short-term gains. She'd given me advance warning about price increases, helped me structure contracts that protected Fortress during volatile periods, and generally treated our account like it mattered. Because of these relationships, Fortress had something most of Cromwell's customers didn't: a handshake agreement on pricing stability and supply priority. It wasn't in writing. It didn't need to be. It was built on years of mutual respect and reliable business. But it was also built on me. I was the relationship. Sterling Cross was the reason Cromwell gave Fortress preferential treatment, not the company, not the CEO. I'd tried to explain this to Harrison once about 3 months after he'd arrived. He'd waved it off. Vendors are vendors, Cross. They need our business as much as we need their materials. Don't oversell your personal importance. I'd let it go then, chalk it up to a new CEO learning the landscape. But now, sitting with that denied expense report, I started to wonder. What would happen if Harrison had to learn that lesson the hard way? The conference happened without me. I followed along through social media posts and the conference app. Watched colleagues from other companies attend the workshops I'd planned to participate in. Saw the announcements I'd expected to hear in person, including one that made my stomach drop. On the second day, Cromwell's CEO gave a keynote about their new strategic direction. They were moving toward exclusive partnership frameworks with their top-tier clients. Basically, they were going to offer enhanced terms and guaranteed supply allocation to customers who committed to higher volume, longer-term contracts with certain exclusivity provisions. The catch, they were only offering this to customers with demonstrated relationship commitment and strategic alignment. I knew exactly what that meant. It meant companies whose leadership showed up, who invested in the relationship, who treated Cromwell like a partner, not just a vendor. I sent Kyle a text, saw the announcement. Are we in the conversation for the partnership framework? He responded 6 hours later. Can we talk when you're back? That wasn't a yes. The call with Kyle happened the following Monday. I'd expected awkwardness. What I got was worse, honesty. Sterling, I'll give it to you straight. Autumn noticed you weren't at the conference. She asked me why Fortress didn't send anyone. I told her I didn't know. Budget constraints, I said, the words tasting bitter. Right, well, here's the thing. The partnership framework is limited. Cromwell's only extending it to 20 manufacturers in the automotive space. Autumn's making the recommendations to their executive team this month. She specifically asked me whether Fortress was still prioritizing the relationship. And what did you tell her? I told her you always had, but I couldn't speak for the company's current direction. Silence hung between us. Kyle, I've been working with Cromwell for 5 years. We've never missed a payment, never canceled an order. We've grown our volume every year. I know that, you know that, but Autumn's looking at signals. Sterling, who shows up matters. And your CEO, Kingsley, right? He's made no effort to engage with our leadership. Not a call, not a visit, nothing. I closed my eyes. What's the timeline? Recommendations go up in 3 weeks. Decisions finalized by end of May. New frameworks take effect July 1st. And if we're not in the partnership tier, you'll still be a customer, but you'll be standard terms, market rate pricing, no allocation guarantees. No advance notice on changes. I did the math in my head. Market rate pricing alone would increase our material costs by approximately 15 to 18%. On our annual spend of $23 million, that was an additional $3.5 to $4 million. The conference trip Harrison denied would have cost $3,100. The irony was almost beautiful. I should have fought harder. Should have escalated, should have gone to the board directly. But I was tired. Tired of explaining basic relationship management to a CEO who thought everything was transactional. Tired of watching good people get treated like spreadsheet entries. Tired of building something valuable only to watch it get dismissed. Instead, I made a different choice. I reached out to Autumn directly. We'd exchanged personal contact information a year earlier during a crisis situation when we'd needed to coordinate material shipments during a logistics disruption. I sent her a carefully worded email. Autumn, hope you're well. I know the partnership framework decisions are coming up. Want to be transparent with you about the situation at Fortress. I wasn't at the conference due to company budget decisions I didn't control. However, I value our relationship and wanted to understand what would be required to keep Fortress in consideration. She called me instead of emailing back. Sterling, I appreciate the candor. I'll be equally direct with you. You personally have been excellent to work with. You understand partnership. You think long-term. But I have to evaluate the company, not just the contact person, and from where I'm sitting, your CEO doesn't value this relationship. I know how it looks. It's not just how it looks. We've had 4 CEO transitions among our client base in the last year. 3 of them resulted in our relationships deteriorating because new leadership didn't understand what their supply chain people had built. They came in thinking they could squeeze vendors, play hardball, treat us as commodities. 2 of those relationships ended. The 3rd is on life support. I understand. Do you though? Because here's what I need to know, Sterling. In 6 months, are you still going to be at Fortress? In a year? Because if I extend partnership terms based on your relationship with us, and then you leave, I'm stuck with a CEO who doesn't return my calls and a company that doesn't see the value. The question landed like a punch. She was asking me to commit, not just to the relationship, but to staying at Fortress long enough to make it worth her while. I can't give you that guarantee, Autumn. I wish I could. The silence stretched. I appreciate the honesty, she finally said. I'll think about it, but Sterling, if I were you, I'd be looking at my options. You're too good to work for someone who doesn't recognize what you bring. We ended the call. I sat staring at my office wall at the charts showing on-time delivery rates and cost savings I'd generated. 8 years of work, relationships built, value created. And a CEO who thought it all came down to squeezing nickels. I didn't start looking for other opportunities right away. Part of me wanted to fight for what I'd built. Part of me hoped Harrison would have some revelation about how supply chains actually worked, but I did start documenting everything, every contract, every relationship, every handshake agreement and informal understanding that kept Fortress running smoothly. I also started paying very close attention to the calendar. Fortress's annual review and budget meeting was scheduled for May 17th. All department heads, full executive team, board observers. It was the big show where we presented results and projections. Cromwell's partnership framework deadline was May 23rd. The timing was interesting. Through April, I watched the situation develop like a slow-motion car crash. Cromwell's account team started subtly shifting their approach with Fortress. Nothing dramatic, just small changes. Kyle started taking longer to respond to emails. Special request accommodations that used to happen automatically now required checking with his manager. The friendly, collaborative tone became slightly more formal. Meanwhile, Harrison continued his cost-cutting crusade. He eliminated our annual company picnic to save $12,000, cut the contract with our cleaning service, and brought in a cheaper company that did half the job. Pushed back on every expense over $500, but he approved a $40,000 rebrand of the executive floor, including new furniture and art. The hypocrisy was stunning. In early May, I had my pre-annual review meeting with Harrison. Just the 2 of us going through my department's performance before the larger presentation. Strong year, Cross, he said, reviewing my summary. Material costs down 3% year over year, delivery performance up, no major supply disruptions, good work. Thank you. I'm planning to highlight supply chain efficiency in the board meeting. Show them we're optimizing operations. I nodded, saying nothing. One question though, I've been reviewing our vendor concentration. 68% of materials from a single supplier seems risky. Have you explored diversification? Every muscle in my body tensed. Cromwell's been reliable for over a decade. The concentration is strategic. It gives us leverage for better terms. or it makes us vulnerable. I want you to develop a contingency plan, identify alternative suppliers, get competitive bids. I want to see options by June. That could impact our relationship with Cromwell. They've given us preferential treatment specifically because of our volume commitment. Harrison leaned back in his chair. Sterling, this is exactly the mindset we need to change. We can't be held hostage by vendors. Business is business. If Cromwell wants our volume, they'll compete for it. I looked at him across that desk. This man who'd never built a supplier relationship in his life, who'd never had to call in a favor during a crisis, who'd never understood that some things couldn't be reduced to a spreadsheet. I'll look into it, I said. I wouldn't, but he didn't need to know that yet. May 15th, 2 days before the annual review meeting, my phone pinged during lunch. An email from Autumn Sheffield. Subject line, Cromwell Partnership Framework Status Update. My heart rate kicked up as I opened it. Sterling wanted to give you advance notice as a courtesy. Cromwell has finalized the partnership framework selections. Unfortunately, Fortress Industries was not selected for inclusion in the top tier. Effective July 1st, your account will transition to standard commercial terms. This includes market rate pricing, current rate card attached, and standard allocation procedures. Your account team will remain Kyle and his support staff, but priority response times and allocation guarantees will no longer apply. I'm sorry this didn't work out differently. I've genuinely valued working with you. Best, Autumn. I downloaded the new rate card with shaking hands. The numbers were worse than I'd estimated. Average price increase of 22% across our primary material categories. On our annual spend of $23 million, that translated to an additional $5.06 million per year. $5 million. Because Harrison saved $3,000. I sat there in my car reading and rereading the email. The professional courtesy in Autumn's words, the finality of it, the collapse of years of relationship building, and something shifted inside me. I'd been angry before, frustrated, disappointed. This was different, this was clarity. Harrison didn't respect what I'd built, he never would. He saw vendor relationships as interchangeable, costs as the only metric that mattered, and people like me as expendable. Fine. Let him learn what happens when the person who holds relationships together stops holding them. I spent the next 2 days preparing. Not my annual review presentation, that was already done. Something else. I drafted my resignation letter, 2 weeks notice. Professional, brief, no dramatics. I reviewed Cromwell's new rate card line by line, calculating exact cost impacts across every product line Fortress manufactured. I prepared a vendor voidance summary, a document outlining exactly how much institutional knowledge and relationship capital was walking out the door with me and what it would take to rebuild those relationships. Spoiler. It couldn't be rebuilt, not in any timeline that would help Fortress. And I waited. May 17th arrived. The annual review meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room. All department heads would present. Finance would run budget numbers. Harrison would hold court. I arrived 15 minutes early carrying my leather portfolio. Inside, my standard presentation materials, my laptop, and 3 pieces of paper. The room filled up. CFO Amanda Riggs, VP of Operations Wesley Hunt, VP of Sales Natalie Cross, no relation though we joked about it, HR Director Timothy Vance, Production Manager James Allen, Quality Assurance Director Sophie Martinez, and Harrison, of course, at the head of the table, master of his domain. The meeting started with finance reviewing cone results, then operations presented production efficiency metrics. Sales walked through client acquisition and retention numbers. My turn came at 3:20 p.m. I pulled up my presentation, walked through supply chain performance, highlighted cost savings, discussed on-time delivery improvements, showed vendor scorecards. Harrison nodded along, occasionally making notes. Excellent work, Sterling, he said when I finished. This is exactly the kind of optimization we need across all departments. Shows what's possible when we focus on efficiency over relationships. That last phrase hung in the air, over relationships. Actually, Harrison, I want to address that point. He looked up, mildly surprised. Oh, you've mentioned several times that business is business, that vendor relationships are secondary to costs, that personal connections don't matter as much as competitive bidding. That's correct, basic business principle. I disagree. But I understand that's your operating philosophy. Confusion flickered across his face. Where are you going with this, Cross? My phone, sitting face up on the table in front of me, lit up with a notification. Perfect timing, though I hadn't planned it. An email from Kyle Hutchinson. Sterling saw the partnership announcement. Really sorry, man. Let me know if you want to talk about the transition timeline. Harrison noticed my eyes flick to the phone. Something important? Actually, yes, I just received confirmation of something I've been expecting. I stood up, portfolio in hand, walked to the head of the table where Harrison sat. The executives around the mahogany table tracked my movement. I opened the portfolio and removed the first document, placed it in front of Harrison. My resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice effective today. The room went dead silent. Harrison stared at the paper like it might bite him. What, Sterling, what is this about? I placed the second document beside the first. Vendor voidance summary. This outlines every supplier relationship that's connected to me personally rather than Fortress as an entity. The relationships that won't transfer to whoever replaces me. The handshake agreements. The informal understandings. The trust built over years, all void as of my departure. His face was shifting through emotions, confusion, anger, calculation. The third document came out of my portfolio. And this is the new rate card from Cromwell Advanced Materials. Our primary supplier, representing 68% of our material spend, they finalized their partnership framework selections yesterday. Fortress didn't make the cut. I slid it across the table. This takes effect July 1st. You'll notice the pricing is significantly higher than our current terms. I've calculated the impact. Bottom line. Approximately $5.06 million in additional annual costs. Harrison grabbed the rate card, eyes scanning the numbers, the color drained from his face. This can't be right, this is. Why weren't we selected for their partnership program? Several reasons. Lack of relationship investment from company leadership. No engagement at strategic levels. Signals that the relationship wasn't valued. For example, when the director of supply chain wasn't approved to attend their annual conference where partnership selections were being socialized. The connection hit him, I could see it in his eyes. The Columbus conference, $3,100, that was the investment required to signal that Fortress valued the relationship with our largest supplier. You denied it as excessive discretionary spending. His jaw clenched. You're telling me that a $3,000 trip would have prevented this? I'm telling you that relationships aren't line items. They're built over time through consistent signals of value and respect. The conference was one signal. Your refusal to engage with their leadership was another. The pattern was clear. Amanda, the CFO, leaned forward. Sterling, walk me through the cost impact again. $5 million annually. $5.06 million based on the rate card increases across our current order volumes. That's conservative, doesn't account for potential allocation issues during tight markets or loss of priority response times. Wesley, the VP of Operations, looked like he might be sick. That completely destroys our margin projections for the next fiscal year. Harrison's hands were flat on the table, papers spread in front of him. This is, Sterling, we can fix this. We can reach out to Cromwell. I can call their CEO, we can negotiate. You can try, they're under no obligation to negotiate, will be standard commercial terms same as any other customer. But you could fix this. You have the relationships. I did have the relationships, past tense. I built them over 5 years while working for Fortress. In 2 weeks I won't work for Fortress anymore. Natalie spoke up from the other end of the table. Why are you doing this, Sterling? This hurts everyone, the whole company. The question deserved an honest answer. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone. I'm doing this because I can't stay somewhere my work isn't valued. For 8 years, I've built relationships that saved this company millions in costs and kept production running through multiple crises. I've done it because I believed the work mattered and the company respected what I brought. But I've learned that to current leadership I'm just overhead. Relationships are soft, costs are what's real. I looked directly at Harrison. So now you get what you wanted, pure transactional business, no relationship premium. Just market rates and standard terms. I hope the savings from my salary help offset the new material costs. The room was silent enough to hear the HVAC system humming. Timothy, the HR director, cleared his throat. Sterling, let's not make rash decisions. Can we talk about what it would take for you to stay? There's nothing rash about this, Timothy. I've thought about it carefully. The decision is made. Harrison was staring at the rate card and I could see him doing math in his head. Probably calculating that my annual salary of $138,000 was a rounding error compared to $5 million in increased material costs. Sterling, his voice was different now, smaller. I didn't understand the full picture with Cromwell. If you'd known it would cost $5 million, you would have approved a $3,000 trip. I understand. But that's exactly the problem, Harrison. You only value things you can measure in immediate dollars. The supplier relationship was worth protecting before it collapsed, not just after. So this is punishment, revenge? No. This is me recognizing that my work isn't valued here and making the rational business decision to leave. The same kind of rational business decision you've been making about cost cutting. Business is business, right? The words landed exactly as I'd intended, a mirror held up to his own philosophy. Amanda was scribbling notes. We need damage control. Sterling, will Cromwell negotiate with you directly? If we contract you as a consultant to rebuild the relationship, maybe. Depends on the terms. Depends on whether they believe Fortress is serious about changing its approach. Depends on a lot of things. Name your price for consulting. I'd expected this. I'm not interested in consulting for Fortress. I'm interested in moving on to an organization that values relationship management as a core competency, not an afterthought. Wesley leaned back in his chair. We're looking at a disaster. Q3 margins are going to collapse when these rates kick in. We can't absorb $5 million in cost increases without major restructuring. Harrison's face had gone from pale to red, anger replacing shock. You're holding the company hostage, Cross, walking out and taking your relationships with you. That's unprofessional. What's unprofessional is denying strategic investments based on surface-level cost optics without understanding the value being protected. What's unprofessional is dismissing your supply chain director's expertise because you think vendor relationships are all the same. I'm not taking anything from Fortress. I'm simply leaving. The relationships were always built on me personally. That's how supplier relationships work. Cromwell does business with people they trust, not just company names. Those relationships were built on company time. With company resources. Fine, make that argument to Cromwell, see if they care, see if they give you partnership rates because I used a Fortress email address when building rapport with their team. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Half the department heads looked sympathetic to me, the other half looked terrified of the business implications. Natalie spoke again, voice careful. Sterling, I respect your decision. But help me understand the timeline. So we have until July 1st before the new rates kick in, but you're only here for 2 more weeks. Is there any possibility of salvaging this? I appreciated that she was thinking strategically rather than emotionally. Salvaging the partnership framework selection? No, that's finalized, but potentially negotiating better terms within the standard commercial framework. Maybe, if Cromwell sees genuine relationship investment from company leadership. And that means more than one phone call. It means consistent engagement, strategic alignment, treating them like a partner rather than a commodity. Harrison's voice was tight. What specifically would that look like? You'd need to engage directly with their executive team, not to negotiate price, to understand their strategic direction and align Fortress with it. You'd need to attend their October Leadership Summit in Atlanta. You'd need to assign a relationship owner who has authority and expertise. You'd need to demonstrate over 6 to 12 months that the previous signals were anomalies, not the new normal. And you could facilitate these introductions? I could. Whether I will depends on several things. Such as, this was the moment, the leverage point, an acknowledgement that the approach to vendor relationships has been flawed, a genuine commitment to changing how Fortress handles supplier partnerships, and a recognition that the people who build these relationships across all departments deserve respect for that expertise. I wasn't just negotiating for myself anymore. I was negotiating for every person in that building who'd been dismissed, undervalued, or treated like a line item. Harrison looked at me for a long moment, pride warring with necessity. I may have underestimated the importance of supplier relationship management, he finally said. Each word looked like it hurt. May have, his jaw clenched harder. I underestimated it. I made decisions about cost-cutting without fully understanding the strategic value of certain investments, including the Columbus conference. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I'd expected. And going forward, I'll engage directly with key suppliers. I'll trust department heads to identify strategic relationship investments, and I'll make sure we're not stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. The room was watching this exchange like a tennis match. That's a good start, I said, but it doesn't change my decision to leave. His eyes widened. You just negotiated commitments from me. I'm agreeing to change the approach. What more do you want? I want to work somewhere that didn't need to lose $5 million to learn these lessons. I want to work for leadership that respects expertise before it becomes a crisis. I want to work somewhere I'm valued for what I contribute, not just for the fire I can put out. So nothing I say matters. You're leaving regardless. I'm leaving because this situation revealed something fundamental about how I'm viewed here. You can't unreveal that, Harrison, but what you can do is learn from it, apply these lessons going forward. Build a culture that values relationships and expertise, be better for the next Sterling Cross who works here. Silence. Timothy spoke carefully. Sterling, I have to ask, do you have another position lined up? I have options in development, nothing finalized. Would you be open to an exit interview? Help us understand what we could improve? Yes. But the conversation we're having right now is that exit interview, Timothy. Everything I'd say is being said. Amanda had been quiet, but now she spoke. From a financial perspective, we need to understand exactly what we're facing. Sterling, will you work with me over the next 2 weeks to map out every supplier relationship impact, not just Cromwell, all of them? I need to build a complete picture for the board. I can do that. That's reasonable. Harrison was still staring at the rate card. $5 million because of a $3,000 trip. No, I corrected. $5 million because of a pattern of undervaluing relationships and expertise. The trip was just the most visible symptom. There were other signals, other moments where you chose short-term savings over long-term value. This was the one that happened to have the biggest price tag attached. Wesley asked, "Is there any chance Cromwell reverses this decision? If we do everything right over the next month?" Reverses the partnership framework decision? Almost certainly not. They've committed to 20 manufacturers. We're not one of them. Best case scenario is we negotiate slightly better rates within the standard framework and rebuild toward potential inclusion in the next cycle. When's the next cycle? 2 years. Wesley dropped his head into his hands. The meeting limped to an awkward conclusion about 20 minutes later. Department heads filed out, some giving me sympathetic looks, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Harrison asked me to stay behind.
When the room cleared, he closed the door. "Level with me, Sterling. Is there any number that makes you stay?" I'd expected this too. "No, I could double your salary. It's not about money. Equity stake, VP title. Whatever you want." "Harrison, you're still trying to solve this transactionally. That's the whole problem. You think everything has a price, that everyone can be bought or negotiated with. Some things aren't for sale. Everything's for sale. That's basic economics. Then I guess you can't afford my price, because what I want is to work for someone who already understands what you're trying to buy from me right now." He studied me. "You really are walking away." "I really am. And you'll help with the Cromwell transition. Introduce me to their leadership. I'll facilitate introductions. I'll provide context and background. I'll give you the best possible handoff I can in 2 weeks, but I won't stay, and I won't guarantee results. Cromwell makes their own decisions based on their assessment of Fortress as a partner. Why help at all? You could burn it all down on your way out." The question showed how little he understood me, because the line workers in production didn't make the decision to deny my conference trip. The admin staff didn't create this situation. The other department heads didn't dismiss relationship management. They're all facing the consequences of decisions they didn't make. "I won't hurt them just to hurt you." Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe. Or just recognition that he'd miscalculated badly. "For what it's worth, Cross, I do respect your work. I didn't understand the full scope of it, but I respect it. I appreciate that. I hope you apply that respect to the people who are still here after I leave." The next 2 weeks moved fast. I documented the critical supplier relationships, set up calls between Harrison and Autumn Sheffield, and prepared handoff materials. The conversation between Harrison and Autumn was strained but professional. She agreed to a face-to-face meeting in June to discuss Fortress's path forward. On May 31st, my last day, I walked out of Fortress Industries for the final time. 3 months later, I was VP of Supply Chain Strategy at Redline Manufacturing, a company twice the size of Fortress with leadership that understood the value of relationships. Better title, better pay, better culture. Then Timothy from HR called. "Sterling, quick update. Harrison's out. Board asked for his resignation effective September 1st. The Cromwell situation was the catalyst, but there were other issues. Morale, retention, cultural fit. They're asking if you'd consider coming back as CEO." I took a breath. "I appreciate them thinking of me, but I'm happy where I am." "Figured. But here's the other thing. Fortress wants to hire you as a consultant." Cromwell reached out. Autumn Sheffield specifically. She said any path back to partnership consideration requires your involvement. They're offering $35,000 for 6 months of advisory work. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Send me the contract terms. I'll review it." I accepted the consulting engagement. Over the next 6 months, I worked with Fortress's new supply chain director, Kayla Robinson. She was sharp, got the relationship piece, and didn't need her ego managed. We rebuilt what had been broken. The new CEO, Richard Okonkwo, called me personally. "Sterling, I've reviewed what happened. I understand why you left. I don't blame you. I'm implementing changes, discretionary authority for strategic investments, relationship quality as a KPI, and I'm personally engaged with our top suppliers. Kayla's told me your consulting made all the difference. Thank you for coming back to help." It felt like closure. A year after I'd walked out of that boardroom, Kyle Hutchinson emailed me. "Sterling, Fortress made the preliminary list for next year's partnership framework. Autumn's recommending them for inclusion. Your work made the difference. Thanks for fixing what got broken." I forwarded it to Kayla with congratulations. She replied, "Couldn't have done it without you." Harrison reached out last week. He's consulting for a PE firm now, evaluating manufacturing acquisitions. Asked for advice on assessing supply chain relationships. I told him to hire someone like you and actually listen to them. I laughed out loud. So what's the lesson from a $3,000 trip that turned into a $5 million problem? It's about knowing your value. Understanding what you bring to the table, recognizing when that value is respected and when it's dismissed. Relationships in business aren't soft skills. They're strategic assets with real financial value. The trust built over years. The goodwill that smooths problems. The partnerships that provide advantages beyond what contracts can guarantee. Those things matter. They have worth. And the people who build those relationships, whether in supply chain, sales, client services, or any other relationship-dependent role, deserve to have that work valued, not dismissed as discretionary spending or personal indulgence. When leadership treats expertise as overhead and relationships as nice-to-haves, they're not being hard-nosed business people. They're being short-sighted. They're optimizing for immediate costs while destroying long-term value. I didn't set out to cost Fortress millions. I set out to do my job well, to build relationships that protected the company, to create value. When that work was dismissed, I made a rational decision. Take my expertise somewhere it would be respected. The financial consequences weren't revenge. They were the natural result of what happens when you break something valuable and then act surprised that it had value. Harrison learned an expensive lesson. Fortress learned an expensive lesson. And I learned that walking away from a place that doesn't value you isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Today, I'm still at Redline, still building supplier relationships, still creating value through partnerships and trust. The difference is leadership here sees it, values it, invests in it. They approved my conference trip to this year's supplier summit without a second thought. Not because it's a perk, but because they understand it's part of the job, part of building the relationships that will save the company millions over time, and that makes all the difference. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had your expertise dismissed, your work undervalued, your contributions treated as overhead, you're not alone. These stories happen every day in conference rooms and corner offices across the corporate world. The only difference is most of them don't come with a $5 million price tag that makes the lesson obvious. Corporate Vault exists to tell these stories, to show that the real drama in business isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, a denied expense report, a dismissive comment, a pattern of small disrespects that add up to something breaking. If you found value in this, if it made you think or feel or recognize something from your own experience, subscribing means we can keep bringing these stories to light. We're building toward that first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, 1,000 people who understand that corporate life is more complex, more human, and more dramatic than the org charts suggest. The button's there when you're ready. Until the next story, remember, know your value, build your relationships, and never let anyone convince you that what you bring to the table doesn't matter. It does. Trust me, I have the rate cards to prove it.